About a dozen years ago, a business student called Coco Zhang taught me how higher education is a very peculiar business. The customers, the shop floor workers, the products, the raw materials, all people, the same people. That's unusual for a business. Students have another role. They're entrepreneurs because they move their time and energy into activities that produce the most possible fun, excitement, love, security, passion, challenge, support, learning opportunities, informal study groups, sports teams, orchestras, care and community. Students do all this in the campus core economy, governed by rules of fairness, reciprocity, and reputational wealth hardwired into social behaviour since long before the invention of money. Throughout that time, core economies have generated intellectual, educational and cultural wealth and social capital. According to Nobel Prize-winning economist Gary Becker, about 40% of United States economic activity takes place in the unpaid core economy. This figure seems likely to be much higher in the student campus community. Your higher education may cost around £60,000 in tuition fees, accommodation and living costs, but in the student community, supportive friendships, academic conversation, informal coaching, mentoring and IT training are exchanged without money changing hands. Paradoxically, this vibrant cashless core economy also generates conventional graduate employability. There are links about core economy in the text below the video. Hi, I'm Glenn. I've worked in UK higher education for a little over 20 years, mainly as a careers counsellor, careers advisor, also as a learning development advisor helping students to learn more effectively. Before that, as a research assistant, research fellow, subject teacher, teaching fellow, and practice development tutor for academics. A range of those kind of roles. Those 20 years were plenty of time to wonder whether university might be one of those tools you can use more effectively when you understand how it works, and long enough to notice that doing what you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends outside your taught program is essential to learning the habits of a happy, connected, worthwhile, satisfying, exciting graduate life and your choice of rewarding graduate job, besides delivering a range of other well-being benefits identified in the European Social Survey. University league tables describe students' outcomes from higher education in terms of salary and graduate level jobs. The average graduate debt is around £60,000. Wow, that is a lot of money. So you might think higher education is all about graduate level jobs and graduate level salaries. And you might think the pursuit of a life that feels happy, connected, satisfying, worthwhile, and no more anxious than you would like is a separate project. You might believe these two projects seem to be in tension in a kind of a work-life balance kind of a way, and that you need to reject one in order to achieve the other. We're going to explore an alternative view, that the pursuit of a student life that feels happy, connected, satisfying, worthwhile, and exciting rather than frightening or dull is a reliable, direct route to your choice of well-paid, fulfilling graduate employment. When students and graduates shape their lives around discovering and doing what they love with like-minded, like-motivated friends, their employability starts to look after itself. What kind of higher education would lead you to a graduate job where you're well paid as compensation for a professional life that feels unhappy, isolated, anxious, pointless, and unsatisfying? Let's have a look at the origin of these ideas about a life that feels happy, connected, satisfying, worthwhile, and no more anxious than you like. There's a growing international public policy interest in well-being. This acknowledges that how much money we have is an incomplete measure of human progress and examines whether increased consumption is a rational end in itself. Resources such as the Office of National Statistics Subjective Wellbeing website map life satisfaction, the extent to which people feel what they do is worthwhile, their happiness, and their anxiety across the UK. There are 3 years of data, there's a scalable map, and an interactive histogram. You can find a broader range of well-being measures mapped across the whole of Europe on the New Economics Foundation website, and links to these resources in the text under this video. The ONS model contains 4 elements. The New Economics Foundation Guide to Measuring Wellbeing suggests these 4 are supplemented by a social trust measure drawn from the European Social Survey. Positive psychologist Martin Seligman's PERMA model is comprised of positive emotions, including happiness, engagement, positive relationships, meaning and purpose, and accomplishment. In both of these very similar models, happiness is one small part of well-being. We'll use this 5-part model of well-being to explore how university works. Seligman describes effortless shortcuts to happiness, so why wouldn't happiness be enough? Why pursue well-being? Doing what you love effortlessly calls out in you productive attitudes such as curiosity, initiative, enthusiasm, ingenuity, drive for results. A kind of superhuman version of yourself, more capable than you will become by focusing only on developing skills. Doing what you love sensitizes your occupational choices to your values, so you have a better graduate life, doing what you love for a business or client who love the same things, employing your curiosity, initiative, enthusiasm, ingenuity, and drive for results to achieve your common goals, and staggering productivity from which your salary is paid. Some UK universities survey their graduates' subjective well-being as part of developing lives for students and graduates that feel satisfying, worthwhile, happy and connected. For £60,000, I wouldn't expect any less. In the words of the UK government's all-party parliamentary working group on wellbeing economics, measure wellbeing, get wellbeing. There's a link to some of this graduate wellbeing data in the text below this video. Okay, you twisted my arm. Let's have a look at it now. Here are the average satisfied, worthwhile, happy and anxious scores for around 1,000 graduates. They're colour-coded, green to red, better to worse. High satisfied, worthwhile and happy scores are green, low anxious scores are green, while high anxious scores and low satisfied, worthwhile and happy scores are red. The overall scores are calculated by adding the 3 positive measures, satisfied, worthwhile and happy, subtracting the negative measure, anxiety, and then adding 10 to produce a range between 0 and 40. Graduate occupations are ranked highest to lowest by this overall score. We collected this data at a UK university by supplementing the Higher Education Statistics Agency's Destinations of Leavers from Higher Education survey, known as the Delhi survey, with the Office of National Statistics subjective wellbeing questions. We need to remember this wellbeing data describes whole lives rather than only graduates' experience at work. A couple of interesting points. Healthcare and education occupations are found towards the top of the table. Waiters and waitresses, sports and leisure assistants, retail assistants and elementary storage occupations, for example warehouse assistants, all report outstandingly low anxiety scores. Before I read this data, my unexamined view was that my ideal anxiety score would be 0. It may be that the graduates working as retail assistants, leisure assistants and warehouse assistants have low anxiety scores because they tend to manage the anxiety associated with applying for graduate jobs by avoiding applying for graduate jobs. Student life is peppered with opportunities to develop more productive anxiety management strategies, and we'll explore this idea later in this video. The subjective study data describes around 2,500 graduates in total. These are average wellbeing scores for graduates from each academic subject area. Again, graduates from healthcare and education tend to report the higher scores in response to the 4 ONS subjective wellbeing questions, but I wouldn't use this data to choose a university course. I'd use it to choose a university lifestyle. So, what determines these scores? We need to remember that the survey asked graduates about their whole lives, not just their employment. Before they arrive at university, students have developed lifestyles which are more or less satisfying, more or less worthwhile, happy, anxious, and socially connected. Course choice may be influenced by these factors. For example, It may be that some academic courses attract students who seek a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. I wouldn't be surprised to find such students studying, philosophy, for example. Throughout university, students engage to a greater or lesser extent with the academic experience, domestic experience, and the campus culture, which can shape the habits of their professional, domestic, and community experience, and account for their experience of satisfying, worthwhile, happy, socially connected, exciting but not terrifying graduate lives. At university, experimentation and engagement drive satisfaction, the sense of meaning and purpose, happiness, anxiety management, and social connection, and establish habits which seem likely to inform graduate expectations and graduate lifestyles. An engaged undergraduate experience seems likely to lead on to an engaged graduate life where your professional, domestic, and community experience all tend to enhance your life satisfaction, sense that what you do is worthwhile, your happiness, your social connection, and your anxiety management. You may be wondering whether it's the job or the lifestyle that leads people to feel that life is satisfying, worthwhile, happy, and socially connected, or conversely, whether well-being enables people to secure a better job and establish a better lifestyle. It may be both. The New Economics Foundation proposes a compelling, dynamic model where well-being develops in a cycle. For most students, a residential university experience provides safe, secure, comfortable living conditions, 3 years of secure income, and endless social connections and opportunities. Student culture feels optimistic. Student lifestyles are notoriously autonomous rather than controlled. University life provides conditions that make it easy for students to grow habits of well-being that will persist into graduate life. You can find resources that introduce this kind of cyclic systems thinking linked in the text below this video. Well, that's the theory. Let's have a look at the data. The Graduate Destination Survey asks graduates for the main reason they took their job. In this table, summarizing responses from around 1,800 graduates, the average scores are converted to percentile scores, so you can see the scale of the differences. Let's compare scores for graduates who took the job because it fitted their career plans with scores for graduates who took the job because it was the only offer they received. For example, those graduates whose main reason for taking their graduate job was that it fitted their career plan reported, on average, lives that were more satisfying than 77% of other graduates in the survey. Graduates whose main reason for taking the job was it was the only offer they received reported, on average, lives that were more satisfying than only 36% of other graduates. You can see a similar difference in worthwhile scores. Graduates who took the job because it fitted their career plan reported, on average, lives more worthwhile than 3/4 of the graduates in the survey. Graduates who took the only offer they received reported, on average, lives more worthwhile than only 37% of the other graduates in the survey. Let's turn back the clock and translate these graduate lifestyle choices into a corresponding set of student lifestyle choices. We don't have data describing the well-being of students making these choices, so I'm speculating here about how undergraduate occupational choice builds habits that determine graduates' life quality. In student life, the main reason for taking the job question becomes, how did you choose the highlight of your previous weekend? Perhaps when you're developing a habit of occupational choice that fits into your long-term interests, then you tend to establish a life that feels satisfying, you have established skills, worthwhile, you care about what you're doing, fairly happy, and a little anxious because you're doing something you care about and you want to do it well. Perhaps when you're developing a habit of experimental occupational choice, then you tend to establish a life that feels reasonably satisfying. You're not yet very skilled in each experiment, quite worthwhile. It's your experiment and you value experimentation for its own sake. Fairly happy, but rather anxiety-provoking, perhaps because it's a new experience, or perhaps anxiety is a price you're habitually prepared to pay in the pursuit of the most thrilling, satisfying, worthwhile experiences, and nerve-shredding anxiety is part of the thrill. And so on, through a list of reasons for choosing last weekend's highlight. Perhaps when you're developing a habit of making occupational choices as stepping stones to greater ambitions, then striving towards these ambitions tends to shape a life that feels worthwhile. Low pay and non-graduate job titles are typical for graduates who reasoned that they took their graduate job to earn a living or to pay off debts. If your finances mean you have to work your way through university, you'll develop determination and time management that graduate employers will find very attractive. Squeezing in time to explore your values and interests at university may open the door to a more satisfying, worthwhile graduate life experience. Perhaps when you're developing a habit of passive occupational choice, then you tend to maintain the standout low anxiety score we saw before with the graduate warehouse assistant. Perhaps a little experimentation can nurture habits that feed well-being into your graduate life experience. So finally, here's how university works. Of course, few explanations are perfect. This won't be exactly how it works for everyone, but let's start a conversation and explore themes in later video postings. You move in with a group of complete strangers, live together and play together with people from unfamiliar cultures, traditions, and locations in a student campus community that organizes itself. Pretty soon, you find yourself in house parties and in community with people more or less intentionally living open-hearted, open-minded, transformative, experimental lives. Research evidence from Rob Holland and his colleagues suggest happiness promotes spontaneous choices. Your friends say, want to come climbing on Saturday? Scuba diving, clubbing, jump out of a plane? Watch stand-up, form a band, enter a business competition? You say yes, and you start to figure out whether you care about what you thought you cared about and what you actually care about most. Because higher education is about critical thinking, you can learn a lot about yourself. Reshaping your values forms part of an internal curriculum through which you rediscover, reinvent, and re-identify yourself. When you're doing stuff that aligns with your values and that you care about, you effortlessly exhibit attitudes such as ambition, initiative, curiosity, ingenuity, drive, and resilience, and find yourself working effectively with colleagues. And it all feels like doing what you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. But to an employer, it looks like their graduate selection criteria: ambition, initiative, curiosity, ingenuity, problem-solving, teamwork, resilience, and drive for results. In your graduate life, it simply feels like a familiar habit of choosing to occupy your time and energy doing the stuff you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. In your day job, in your relationships and family life, in your friendships and in your community life and your hobbies. Students aren't passive consumers in the campus core economy. They're producers and entrepreneurs moving their time and energy into activities that produce the most possible fun, excitement, love, security, passion, challenge, support, learning opportunities, informal study groups, sports teams, orchestras, care and community. That's how doing what you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends effortlessly builds the habits of happiness and social trust that persist into your graduate life and enable you to operate in and benefit from a supportive social network. The habit of sensitizing your occupational choices to your values increases your control and sense that what you do in your graduate life is worthwhile. It calls out productive attitudes in your working life. Okay, that's happiness, social trust, meaning and purpose. Let's have a look at satisfaction. Had I mentioned before, you're doing the stuff you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. You begin to develop a sense of personal agency, knowing and doing what's important to you. You establish a style, strategies and skills that respond comfortably to your personality. Many university careers services run workshops using models such as Myers-Briggs Type to extend your understanding about your own and about other people's personalities. It's part of the open-hearted, open-minded critical inquiry of your higher education. When you're doing this stuff you're driven to do because you love it, you develop skills such as negotiation, communication, problem-solving, leadership, and a style that is a productive, authentic, comfortable expression of your personality. You move into a virtuous cycle of achievement, increasing your confidence, prompting you to set yourself more ambitious goals, driving you to develop skills, strategies and styles as you hopefully achieve again, and so on. Your confidence is part of your anxiety management, your achievement yields satisfaction, and you record what you've done to use in graduate job applications. And this all feels like doing what you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. But to an employer, it looks like their graduate selection criteria: ambition, negotiation, communication, problem-solving leadership, confident, authentic personal style. And in your graduate life, it simply feels like a familiar habit of confidently applying your existing skills and learning new ways to do these things you love and that are important to you with like-minded, like-motivated friends. In your day job, in your relationships and family life, in your friendships and your community life, and in your hobbies. Finally, you are involved in an academic experience, partly outside and partly inside the self-organising student community. Your academics are doing something they're passionate about, we hope. They're passionate because their time and energy is occupied by activities and goals that respond to their values. In collaboration with students, they co-produce a professional academic culture wild in ambition, rich in initiative, curiosity, ingenuity, drive and resilience, and through which these attitudes of productivity and the habits of values-based occupational choice are transmitted and acquired by students like you. You develop the habit of critical thinking, a Zen-like non-attachment to views, and an open-hearted, open-minded desire to uncover and follow facts and reasoning wherever they may lead. Facts and reasoning about your academic subject, about the external world in general, facts and reasoning about yourself and about other people. At university, you encounter a sequence of increasingly demanding, often unfamiliar assessed coursework, exams, group work, lab work, field work, projects, and a final year dissertation. University is meant to stretch you, not break you. Your university employs and your tuition fees pay for learning development advisors, personal tutors, and counsellors to work as your assistants in your development. At work, many graduates have assistants. Celebrities have stylists, managers have management assistants, even academics have research assistants. At university, you can learn how to use assistants and collaborate with student colleagues so everyone gets more done with less wasted effort. Through this sequence of challenging activities, you develop skills, strategies, and styles. You know what to do when you don't know what to do. You develop anxiety management habits. You learn to anticipate and avoid problems. You work with colleagues to help everyone avoid panicking and giving up. You learn how to manage substantial projects. You know how to manage processes such as creative design, experimental design, engineering design, and communication design, writing reports, presentations, and posters. You learn a problem-solving style that's optimistic, resilient, patient and persistent, imaginative, creative, and ingenious, structured and self-critical, informed by your research skills and your knowledge. To you, this all feels like natural progression in your higher education. In your final year, you may well notice feeling surprisingly and pleasingly capable, organised and productive. But to an employer, this looks like their graduate selection criteria: anticipating, avoiding and solving problems, structured, intelligent project management under pressure, calm, clear thinking, good-humoured. And in your graduate life, it simply feels like a familiar habit of confidently, carefully applying your existing skills and learning new ways to do the stuff you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. That, in my view, roughly speaking, is how university works. And you know what? Actually, you don't need to be at university to do what you love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. You can find links about the economics of well-being in the text below the video. If you want your higher education and your graduate life to feel satisfying, worthwhile, connected and happy, send your friends a link to the video. But watching videos is not going to make university work. We all need to talk about how university works, and we all need to expect our lives to feel satisfying, worthwhile, connected and happy. We all need to work out how to make this happen, in my view. Maybe we could try doing what we love with like-minded, like-motivated friends. I'm still learning, so send me your comments and questions. See you next time.